Hello, friends. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm excited. Are you excited? This is a show, let me just say that today's guest, this is a show that I've been really looking forward to. I've been telling my friends, my family about my special guest today. So if you're joining me live, you're in for a treat. And if you're joining me on the replay, happy replay day to you as well. But right now, we are live, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's live Level Up conversation.
Welcome to Level Up with Winning Sun. Part of it. Award-winning financial pro. Get ready. I present to you Level Up with Winnie Sun.
Hello, friends. I'm Winnie Sun, your host, Forbes contributor, CNBC Council member, award-winning financial pro, here to keep you on top of relevant, trending business news. But what makes our show special and really, really fun is that you are part of today's discussion and every show that we do. We're going to be sharing audience feedback during our community moments. Thank you so much for joining me. Before I get deep, though, I got to say a big shout out to Brian Schumann joining us from LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much for being here. Joshua, CrossX Fighter, YouTube Live. It's great to see you here as well. Vicky Garvey from Facebook Live. Awesome to see you as well. Wow, so many good friends today, so many great. And if you're new to the show, welcome to the show. I always say you join, as someone who's watching today, and hopefully we'll leave as friends. Now today, I just wanted to welcome you back as we have a very special guest. As I sort of hinted earlier, she's someone actually I've followed on social media for quite some time now. And it's one of those stories where you're just like, wow, that's incredible. And I'm excited to introduce her to you and let her share her story and journey with you as well. She's actually one of the first Americans in her community to contract COVID-19. I know, not something to be proud of, but what changes and what makes this very special, and what a special story this is that she now leads the largest grassroots movement in America dedicated to actively ending this pandemic. Their organization now exceeds 180,000 members. We're in for a treat. I can't wait for you to hear her story. But before we jump to her, you know how this begins. We got to talk about how the market closed. I always wish I had better news. And lately, it's been a little difficult to tell you better news. But let's start with this. The Dow closed down 236 points. The NASDAQ closed down almost 30 points at 29. The S&P 500 also down 22 points today. As you remember, yesterday, the Dow fell more than 1,000 points, making actually, unfortunately, the worst sell-off in nearly 2 years. Now, the S&P 500 also experienced its worst decline since June of 2020, and so making it down about 4%. NASDAQ also fell almost 5% yesterday. Now, there was a new study that came out this week, in fact, from Fidelity, that talked about the average spend for retirees in terms of healthcare costs. Now, this is really interesting because a lot of times we think, well, we're about to retire or we're looking towards planning for retirement. And historically, we always assume that we're going to be spending less money when we do retire. But believe it or not, that's not always the case. And this is really important because the average couple, they found, spends over $300,000 on healthcare costs after retirement. That's a really big, daunting number. Now, we know that, certainly there's other costs could go down, but in terms of healthcare, it's actually going to get more expensive. And those of us who are planning towards retirement or have loved ones in retirement, these are the things that we want to be paying attention to. In addition, there was another study that came out, and I want to share this with you as well, is that between 1/4 to 1/3 of those who have contracted COVID-19. In fact, either it be mild illness or severe illness, many people will experience long COVID, right? You've probably heard about that, read about it in the news. And so they're talking now with over 81.5 million COVID cases and counting reported in the United States, that more than 20 million Americans have experienced long COVID. And we know that we're not through the pandemic yet. So what are we going to do? Now, with that in mind, we're talking business, we're talking finance, and we're talking about planning ahead. That means we got to go to the experts. And we want to find people who know this a little bit better than we do so we can gather the information to make good decisions for our own financial lives and those that we care about. So, in the spirit of that, I am so excited to welcome Diana to the show. Diana, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for asking. How are you? I feel like these days that has to be the first question. Everyone safe? Everyone healthy?
Everybody healthy, we are healthy, Diana. So far so good, and hopefully those of you joining us are here as well. Diana, you're the founder of Survivor Corps, which we talked about earlier. Just such an important organization. I want you to sort of share that with us, in a bit. But I wanted to make this note. I was really proud of you to see this. The United States Library of Congress has selected SurvivorCorps.com's website for inclusion in the nation's historic coronavirus web archive. So that's a big deal. And I know this because I've been following you on social media for some time, Diana. You have a lot of fans. And not just a lot of fans on social media, but a lot of experts in this space, a lot of people that we go to for smart decisions as it pertains to this pandemic. In fact, maybe you could share with us sort of your backstory of how you got to your role today.
Yeah, so look, it's something that you could never have predicted. As I say all the time, I'm ready to blow up my bingo card because none of this, this has all been a strange journey. Just as some background, when I got COVID, I was a suburban soccer mom, essentially. I had done many things in my past. I'd gone to law school. I'd worked for the government. I'd worked at the State Department in my early 20s. I had had a, fairly exciting life. And I became a photographer, which I did for about 14 years. And the last few years of which I was traveling around the world. So lest I get a lot of people online assuming that I'm a real hypochondriac or germaphobe. Just to put that to rest, let me explain what I was doing a year before I got COVID. I was in India photographing the world's largest gathering of humanity, 50 million people at the Kumbh Mela in February 2019. And I photographed the consecration of the Ganges while chest high in the Ganges River for over an hour. That said, just to show you how virulent COVID is, after an hour in the Ganges River, I didn't even need a Pepto-Bismol. That said, I ended up being one of the first confirmed cases of COVID in the country. So when I got COVID, but look, I was not the first person to get COVID by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it turns out that my son had it before me. We didn't have tests at that point. He later tested positive for antibodies. I went to a meeting on March 9th in 2020. And, I had been watching, as I said, I'm not a germaphobe, but I am a news junkie. So I had been watching this virus go, in China and tear through Italy. And I was really glued to the coverage. I know enough. I mean, look, we all know we live in a global community. We all are one flight away from each other. So nothing that happened in China or, anywhere in the world, in Italy, anywhere, is going to remain confined to that country. And so, it was only a matter of time before it came to the United States. That said, I didn't think that it would be so quickly. I could never forecast what actually happened. But I went to this meeting on March 9th. There were about 10 people there, and 2 of them had been at a conference from March 2nd to March 7th at the Sheraton Hotel in New York City, which ended up being one of the first super spreader events.
Wow.
Everyone in the meeting was infected, and 1 died 2 weeks later. I woke up on Friday the 13th, March 2020, because honestly, you couldn't script it, with every symptom under the sun, with a high fever, which I had not had, I had the flu once, about 12 years ago. That was the last time I had a fever. I felt like I had an elephant sitting on my chest, which ended up being COVID pneumonia. I had, every symptom, and I just woke up knowing this had to be it. I don't know why. It could have just as well been the flu at that point, but there was just something different about this. And I really fought to get tested and got a fair amount of media coverage. I ended up testing positive. And, at that point, I had a very average case of COVID. I was never hospitalized. I never came close to being hospitalized. I had what's referred to as mild COVID. Keep in mind that mild COVID involves COVID pneumonia. It involves encephalitis. It involves a host of really difficult ailments that normally you would be going to your doctor for, and there was no medical guidance whatsoever. There were raging debates at that point of whether or not you could take Motrin. Really, nothing was known, and the only advice given was, stay in isolation, and if your lips turn blue, go to the ER. But if anything short of that, stay home. And I was terrified to end up in the emergency room because at that point, it was a quick route from the ER to being on a ventilator, from what it seemed. And so it was frightening, but not because I was in such dire circumstances. But again, my case of COVID ended up looking a lot like many people's. The New York Post gave me a daily column and video blog during that time called my Coveted Diaries. And essentially, I was the only good news story happening in America. So I got a lot of media attention. This was a time when New York was truly on fire. And so here was the story of somebody who was going to survive. And so it brought some hope to people. And, here's one of those things that you wouldn't have expected. Because I had been a photographer, that imagery of me getting tested was those were the only images of anyone in America who had gotten tested at that point. And I knew, because of having been a photographer, to take the photos landscape rather than portrait so that they would work for television and so on and so forth. And, those little details are, what ended up getting all of this coverage. And while I was in isolation, because I was the only person most people in my world knew who had COVID, there was an email circulating from Mount Sinai looking for people to donate convalescent plasma. So essentially, plasma is sort of the amber liquidy, so amber to clear part of your blood. And so it's like giving blood, but they're able to spin out the plasma and actually put the red and white blood cells right back in your arm. And then because my body did exactly what it was supposed to do, it built up a defense of antibodies, which live in your plasma. And so I was able to, I presumed I would be able, as soon as I recovered or, survived this thing, I would be able to donate my plasma. And that plasma could be used for patients whose bodies had not mounted that same defense system. And it was a way of saving lives, which was incredibly inspiring, given the fact that the only people who could save lives at that point were white coats. And I hadn't taken science since high school. And the more, I got incredibly curious about the plasma world. I went deep. I become a little bit obsessive about these things. And, people talk about fatigue as being a part of COVID. I always remind people it's actually sleep disturbances. I was never fatigued. I had incredible insomnia and almost manic energy.
Wow.
I credit the creation of Survivor Corps to that manic energy and the insomnia. But I went deep on this plasma stuff and I started researching it, and it's just amazing. It started to be used in the 1890s against diphtheria. The Nobel Prize was won for it in 1901. And it's been the first line of defense with pandemics, with novel diseases ever since, because until you're able to develop a vaccine, it's a crude but very effective way of giving somebody an antibody response that their body wasn't able to naturally produce. And, we're talking about, finances and economics, and I am a big believer in free markets, but I foresaw the plasma market becoming competitive and where patients were going to be a commodity. And, free markets are terrific, but in a moment of global crisis, we needed collaboration, and we needed, we couldn't take chances, and there was no point of having different medical institutions fighting with each other over these few patients who are qualified to donate plasma. And so one of the original intents of Survivor Corps was, the realization, if I'm going to be one of the first survivors, there are going to be many, many to follow. And if we could band together as a coalition, as a group, we could neutralize that market. We could flood that market. And that's exactly what we did. We ended up making it so that none of those medical institutions ever had to put out a single advertisement. None of them had to spend their time and precious resources recruiting because we did it for them.
Wow.
And so we kicked off the plasma movement in America. And the other sort of points of when I created Survivor Corps, that was the main one. And the others were, at that point, I actually, Dr. Fauci did a Facebook Live with Mark Zuckerberg on, I believe it was March 23rd. I got in the last question of the session, which was, what are your expectations of durable immunity? And he said he figured that it would be at least 6 months to a year, similar to other coronaviruses. And so based on that, I started Survivor Corps the next day with the mission of mobilizing an army of survivors to donate their plasma, but also to support science, to engage in every medical and scientific study for which they qualified. And third, to be able to, I named it after the Peace Corps, because I thought that we would be able to go help out in hospitals and not be a drain on PPE. I thought we would be able to go to the grocery store for the elderly so that they could stay home and stay safe. That part didn't pan out, but, we became a patient advocacy group only a few weeks in, maybe, by April of 2020. We did not start out as a patient advocacy group, which is quite unusual. We became one because we had to be, when we found that so many of our members were not recovering.
Wow.
That's a very long-winded answer.
No, that's incredible, Diana. And I gotta say, I'm so grateful for you to share this story. My dad was actually a recipient of COVID plasma treatment. So I definitely was very grateful that he had that treatment. I think a lot of Americans,
incredible.
Yeah, a lot of Americans, I think,
did it help or did it?
Well, it helped temporarily.
Yeah.
But I certainly think that,
We've learned since then that it's the earlier you use it, the more effective it is. And, it's like if you give someone, penicillin is a wonder drug, but if you give it to somebody on their deathbed, it's really not going to help them.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's what I want to talk to you about. So talk to me about a Survivor Corps now, right? You founded it this way. What are the main areas of focus now?
Wow. There's hardly a pot that we do not have our hands in at this point. We run our community is on Facebook. It's an open group, open to everybody. And you do not need to have had COVID. Someone in your life might have it. It doesn't matter. I always say the smartest clinicians are members of Survivor Corps, because that is where people can go and ask their questions, where if you have a symptom that you don't recognize, is this related to COVID? Is it not? Is it related to long COVID? Is it not? You put in a keyword search, and because I started this on March 24th, 2020, and we have almost 200,000 members, we have literally millions of posts. So if you only see it come up 10 times, probably not related to COVID. If you see it come up 1,000 times, you're onto something. So the community is not only a community of people who've become incredibly close with one another, who are working to help heal themselves and each other, but it's also a group that is generating real patient-generated, real-world evidence that we are then able to use to feed to the scientific and medical community to guide the science that they are doing. So that is one piece. We are heavily involved in the science. We regularly publish papers with Columbia, with Yale, and we are very involved in legislative work. We've worked on both sides of the aisle, testified in front of Congress. We advise the White House, the CDC, NIH, HHS. So we are deeply involved on those levels. There's really not a part of this, talking about early therapeutics, the fact that plasma would have been better off from the beginning used much earlier. In fact, before you're ever hospitalized. When plasma fell away and we moved to monoclonal antibodies in winter of 2020 to 2021, we launched the first portal for monoclonal antibodies in the country called gotcovid.org. And we were able to work with Regeneron, with Optum Health, and we got this up and running because we are a tiny operation. We were founded by a group of friends who were looking to try to help the world in a moment of crisis. And we were able to put this together over a long weekend.
Wow.
And it ended up being the most effective portal to get monoclonal antibodies that existed, so much so that HHS actually tried to buy it from us in spring of 2021. So there is really not a piece of this that we're not involved in. One of the things that I enjoy the most is, going into the media and being able to explain to people, breaking down the science and explaining, what do we know? What do we not know? What are the rules of play? How do you gather with your family safely? How do you get early therapeutics? What happens if you test positive? What do you do? Practical advice. We've been very short on that. And we've been here to sort of fill in the gaps where we see the government not coming through where they need to. And, we are also an unusual patient advocacy group in that we're not standing on the corner banging pots and pans saying, pay attention to us, pay attention to us. People are paying attention. That's not the issue. We are there to bring ideas to the table and bring them to fruition hand in hand with the government. And that's exactly what we've been doing.
Wow, that's incredible. It's so incredible because I think that a lot of people hearing your story might have thought that you came from a medical background or, or you ran a nonprofit prior to this, but you didn't. This is something that really you decided to do because it affected you, affected so many people that you care about. And I'm sure there's a lot of other things you could be spending your time on, Diana. So thank you for what you do today. I want to talk about this though, because I've seen you talk about this on social media. I know how important it is, and it's certainly becoming even bigger of a topic now. We kind of talked about it right in the beginning, the topic of long COVID. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because I think although it's affecting millions of Americans, millions of people worldwide, I think still there's a lot of people that don't see this as being as big of an issue as many might.
Yeah, we're talking about the thorniest issue around COVID. Long COVID is, first of all, let's just explain that this is not unique. And this is our own fault for, living in a historical vacuum and not recognizing the fact that, look, I say this all the time. Oliver Sacks wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times in 2005 warning about the neurological sequela of a possible avian flu pandemic, using examples from the 1918 flu and perfectly predicting long COVID in 2020. He said that there's been no viral pandemic or epidemic that has not been followed by neurological sequela since the time of Hippocrates. So this is not new, but it is severe. And, counter to a lot of the media attention you hear, which is all about brain fog and fatigue. First of all, it's sleep disturbances, and it is not brain fog. It is cognitive dysfunction. Brain fog makes it seem like a hangover. And this sort of terminology is really important in the same way that the CDC says, when we say mild, we don't mean mild the way you mean mild. You know what? Use the right words because it really matters. And, when you think about mild, we looked at, was there one symptom that was going to be most predictive of long COVID? Long COVID being basically having symptoms longer than 12 weeks, 10 to 12 weeks. And when we looked at, was it a cough? Was it a headache? What was it? The most predictive symptom of long COVID was being asymptomatic. Let that sink in. That is shocking. And I want to paint a picture of what long COVID looks like in the real world. We're talking about healthy mothers of young kids who look just like me, maybe 10 years younger, but just like me, who are now walking with walkers or in wheelchairs. We have, people in their early 30s who are on feeding tubes, who have lost all of their teeth. People in their early 40s who are being diagnosed with early onset dementia, neuropathic pain so severe that it mimics advanced diabetes, severe dermatological problems, loss of hearing, loss of sight, tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, which might sound annoying, but it can actually be so maddening that it has driven long COVID patients to take their own lives. In fact, we are seeing a suicide ideation rate of minimum 18% within Survivor Corps. And, part of the problem is that there are very few answers. And so people are really suffering. And we haven't gotten into the postural orthopedic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, which is basically you're sitting down, you get up, get really dizzy and lightheaded. What happens? You sit back down and you end up not being able to move around because it's incapacitating, because your blood pressure shoots from a normal level, your heart rate skyrockets. And, these are really serious issues. We're seeing muscle wasting. People look like they've aged a decade over the course of months. This is really serious stuff. And so I cringe every time I hear it described in the media as brain fog and fatigue. This is a much more sinister disease. This is something that is taking away people's lives and their livelihoods. They cannot go back to work because just on the cognitive dysfunction alone, if you are experiencing that, it doesn't matter whether you drive a truck, whether you work the line at McDonald's or you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you're not going back to any of those jobs. And there is no job out there that you don't need cognitive function for. It does not matter what you do. And so if you are, you could lose your job, most likely your spouse then becomes the caretaker because there's no cooking or cleaning. People can't even walk across their rooms. I can't emphasize this enough. The vaccines are absolutely amazing. They are miraculous. Early therapeutics are amazing. They are miraculous. None of it is going to prevent long COVID. And so while they will keep you from dying, and that needs to be your number one concern, and probably keep you out of the hospital, but less and less so, it will almost definitively save your life. But living with long COVID is no kind of life. And look, I had a very mild case of long COVID. I had a symptomatic relapse about 2 months after my initial infection. And it was pretty miserable, but mine was incredibly mild and it cleared up sort of on its own with time. I am the unicorn. That doesn't happen to many people. And so I'm probably the only prominent, patient advocate out there who is not suffering from the disease for which I'm advocating. And look, this is your mother, this is your father, this is your sisters, your brothers, your kids. Kids can get long COVID. They get long COVID. Estimates have been 10%. Of adults, the ranges have been anywhere between 7% and 60%.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, it's so scary. And I think, sometimes people are saying, well, I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. I hear a lot of people now. There's so many more people that we know that have COVID, are recovering from COVID, and they keep saying, it's okay. It's okay. I'm okay. It was like the flu. It was like a cold and I'm okay. But when do you know, I guess, Diana, is there a way to know whether or not you're like yourself, like sort of a unicorn, right? You got lucky. Because I think all of us sort of believe that if we get COVID, we're going to be unicorns.
Yeah, it's not a great mindset to be in. It's one of these things that you need to, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And this is something to avoid at all costs. Not only that, with the reinfection rate that we are seeing, remember that each infection can lead to long COVID. It's not just the first, and then that the next one's going to be milder. You don't know whether your acute phase is going to be better or worse than the last time, and you don't know whether or not each one is a roll of the dice. And the odds are not in your favor. And one of the things to think about is, why do people think that they're the unicorn? Because they're healthy, they're young, they go to the gym, they eat a healthy diet. Doesn't matter. In fact, one of the theories of long COVID, and there are probably overlapping theories that will all pan out to be true, but one of them is that it's an overreaction, an unregulated overreaction of the immune system. Who has the best immune system? Who has the most robust immune system? Young, healthy women. That's why women in their late 30s are the most likely to be diagnosed with autoimmune issues, with multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, ME/CFS, other sort of chronic post-viral diseases that also lead to an unregulated overresponse of the immune system. So the healthier you are, actually you're, the unhealthier, as unhealthy as you are, that might land you in the hospital. The healthier you are, the more likely you are to get long COVID, which is why we are seeing so many college athletes, so many, really fit
Wow.
people who are sidelined. They are never going to be able to play that sport probably again. From the looks of it, you cannot predict where you are going to fall on that spectrum, nor can you predict from the severity. As I said, when we looked to see what was the most predictive, it was being asymptomatic. And a paper just came out yesterday saying that 75% of long COVID patients were not hospitalized. It's really, really important to remember, and also to remember about your kids. So I take a lot of issue with this let it rip approach that we have right now in this country, because we are really underestimating the physical toll, the financial toll. If we think that we are, we want to let the economy flourish, so we are going to pretend that the pandemic is over, that means you don't understand the economy and you don't understand long COVID, because what this is going to do to the labor market is going to be staggering.
Yeah, it's
I
gonna be
mean,
staggering. Not only that is what we talked about earlier, Diana. I mean, the how much is this going to then hurt the government too? Because people are going to need long-term care. They're gonna, people are going to be
disability,
disabled. It's significant.
absolutely. Disability alone. Long COVID is now under the ADA, is officially a disability. That said, I don't know a single person who is qualified for disability. So, you have a lot of government officials saying, oh, it's terrific. Now you can get, it's not considered a disability. Check that mark. Well, it has to work in real life. We actually, we are fighting for appropriations to get immediate financial relief, because you have people who are becoming homeless. You have people who are having to sell their car to pay for medications. And the worst part of it is that people are spending all their money on, medical interventions, and we have no medical answers. There are no cures for this right now. And there's unlikely ever to be any magic pill that's going to be discovered to treat long COVID. It is a maddening syndrome, and it doesn't look like there's any end. I say this all the time, but we talk about surges, we talk about waves in COVID. There is no long COVID wave. It is a straight line, a straight trajectory up, and there is not going to be any dip.
Well, Diana, let me ask you this. I've heard recently, my kids and one of their classmates, I talked to a parent and they said, well, I'm going to let my children go back to normal, right? They're going to join band again. They're going to do this again because long COVID happens to mostly impacts women, like you mentioned, right? And so I have sons. I'm just going to let them go ahead and live their life, right? When you hear things like that, how does what would you say if you could? I'm sure there's a lot of people that say that too. You're a fear monger and you're trying to get people all riled up, but what do you say to that?
Well, let me tell you a story. I told you about my son who ended up having had COVID before me. He had it in late January, early February of 2020. Mild case. He's 11 years old at the time. And 9 months later, he was sitting watching TV, and one of his adult front teeth fell out unprompted with no blood loss. And that ended up being a result of COVID. It was written up in the New York Times. His story was written up. And it was up until then, we had no idea that there were dental ramifications. I didn't realize how vascular an area the jaw was there. And as it turns out, there is not a single organ that is not at risk for being compromised, because every single organ relies on blood flow, which is why we see everything from COVID toes clotting in, the extremities to erectile dysfunction. Blood flow is blood flow. And where you lose blood flow in the jaw, teeth come out. So that happened 9 months later out of the blue. What's to say what's going to happen 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line? We don't know. Remember, what we think of as polio is actually long polio. And this is, think about the fact that we go to such extreme lengths. When I was pregnant, I, maybe would have a sip of wine every few weeks. Only in the last trimester, I was so careful. I would only feed my kids when they were babies organic food, and I did everything. I breastfed all of this stuff. But you're going to just go give them a neurodegenerative disease, whether or not you end up with long COVID. It's been shown that the brain literally shrinks from having been infected with COVID, regardless of how bad it is. So we're putting all of these efforts into raising healthy children. Maybe spare them the neurodegenerative disease if you have the option. Look, my kids are in school. They took away masks after spring break. Guess what? My daughter had COVID 2 weeks ago. Her entire lacrosse team had COVID. They had a prom, senior prom, a week later. Half of the senior class had COVID. And it's now becoming not, have you had COVID? It's how many times have you had COVID? And that is, it scares me. I find it incredibly frightening. We know that kids can be very affected by long COVID, and we don't know what's down the line. Which is why we should be tracking people, because God forbid we have a surge of early dementia cases of 18-year-olds. We want the first possible signal. We don't know what the end story of this. We're only reading the first chapter right now.
So Diana, I want to hear this. I think a lot of people are watching, a lot of parents are watching. What do you suggest? What are ways that we should be protecting our children as we look towards fall?
Masking, masking, masking. Masking works. First, look, my deepest sympathies to all of you out there with 5 and unders. I can't imagine what stress you all must be under with having unvaccinated children and young children to boot. I mean, that is, I hope that this gets resolved as soon as possible. I got my kids vaccinated on the first day possible. I got them boosted on the first day possible. But guess what? You take away the masks, everyone gets COVID. And my biggest rule is do not eat indoors with other people. Do not go to restaurants. Go to restaurants. Definitely go to restaurants. Get a table outside. That's all you need to do. It's May. There are very few places in the country right now where it's not warm enough to, even if you have to bring a jacket, sit outside. A lot of these places have heat lamps. Getting pizza, it doesn't matter what it is. If you're sitting in a restaurant indoors with other people, chances are pretty high you're going to walk out with COVID. And so beyond getting vaccinated, it's having, really wearing those masks, and not just any mask, but wear a good quality mask. There's a nonprofit organization called Project 95, and they are a terrific organization, and you know that what you're getting is the real stuff. You're getting the real N95s, and they vet all of their products, and it's a nonprofit. It's amazing. And stock up, have masks on hand, and have a plan for if your family does get infected, do they qualify for early therapeutics? And make sure that you have a plan to know whether or not they qualify and how to get them.
I love it. So indoor banned, your opinion?
Terrible. You're literally blowing spit all over the place. We knocked off singing for a long time because that's terrible. The shouting is awful. I mean, can you imagine? My son played the trumpet. I mean, he was awful. I was very, very happy when that ended. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, I just remember there's just spit coming out through that instrument in every direction. This is an aerosolized virus. I was on a plane the other day from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. I get on, I'm wearing, full on respirator and everything. And the guy 2 seats down from me starts wiping down the entire row with alcohol wipes, not wearing a mask. Wow. This is an aerosolized virus. It does not matter how many people are offering you hand sanitizer. Look, wash your hands, definitely. And there's nothing wrong with wiping down the seats on a plane if you have allergies or if you're immunocompromised or for whatever reason, if it makes you feel better, it doesn't matter. But if you're doing that and you're not wearing a mask, there is cognitive dissonance going on.
Absolutely. All right, Diana, you have been just so generous with so much knowledge. And honestly, I wish this show was twice the length that it is because
So do I.
I want to spend more time with you. And so we're definitely going to have you back. But, I want to talk about this. I mean, you've done such incredible work. I've been following you on social media. One of the things that I heard there's a couple of weeks ago, I was following and saying that we need help. So I want to talk about that. What are some elements that are needed to escalate your work? We definitely want to support you. How can people help?
We need funding. We need funding. We are a tiny organization that runs on a shoestring, but without that shoestring, we will fall apart. And we offer a tremendous resource to the world. Our website, www.survivorcore.com, as you said, it was inducted into the Library of Congress in September of 2020. And remains, it's the only dynamic map of all post-COVID care centers in the country. We are leading research. We are playing such a vital role, but because we've been around since the beginning, everyone sort of takes this for granted. If you go to our website, there's a link to donate. We have 501c3 status under a fiscal sponsor, so it's all tax deductible. You would be doing a tremendous service to humanity by keeping us alive. And we are at a crossroads, and it would be a tremendous shame if we shut down. People, it sounds crazy. If we shut down, people will die. It's that stark. It's that simple. And we were very lucky to get some very generous grants at the beginning from the Gates Foundation and Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. But, these places are fickle. What they want to fund one year might not be what they want to fund the following year. And so we are really hoping that private donations, that, maybe some company out there who wants to do some good will join up with us and support us. And we're out there supporting everyone else. People are very quick to call us when they need help. This is our time. We are asking you for your help.
I love it. Thank you so much, Diana, for sharing that. I definitely will be happy and honored to help. And I hope that those of you listening and watching will consider doing the same. Let me ask you this, Diana. What else have I not asked you that you'd like to share with us?
So I know we've been talking a lot about early therapeutics, and I always want to make sure that when I speak to any audience, that people can walk away with some actual tangible knowledge that they can share and spread around. Give some, you need something in your pocket to walk away with. And this is what my current advice is. If you get COVID, the best way to deal with it is to get an early therapeutic if you qualify. So right now, it started out with REGEN-COV, when President Trump got COVID and he got monoclonal antibodies, and then it morphed into various different monoclonal antibodies, which were all infusions. And then Paxlovid, which is available now, some people call it Paxlovid. Paxlovid is available now. It is a Pfizer product. It is a blister pack of pills. There's no infusion anymore. It's not a monoclonal antibody. It's an antiviral. And it is the most effective way right now of tamping down your virus. And one of the theory, look, we know that monoclonal antibodies did not, it turns out, prevent long COVID. And the jury is out on Paxlovid. We don't know. But there's a chance that it will, because another one of these theories behind long COVID is that there's viral persistence. So how do you get Paxlovid? You need to qualify. So if you follow me on Twitter, I'm at Diana Berrent. And I am regularly giving out advice here. These are the qualifications. And people are saying, oh, I'm not sick enough. I'm not, this enough or that enough. Well, you know what? You look at the rules and almost everyone qualifies. My 15-year-old got COVID 2 weeks ago. I got her Paxlovid the same day she tested positive, because that has to be your goal. It's not how sick you are. In fact, you want to take it while you were feeling good, so you stay feeling good. This whole conversation about Vice President Harris and was she symptomatic enough to receive it, that was silly. That's not how this works. You want to get it the day you test positive, regardless whether you have symptoms or not. And to qualify, guess what? You ever been depressed? You ever smoked a cigarette? Ever? ADHD? Do you live in an area that is disadvantaged? You come from a socioeconomic background that's disadvantaged, a racial or ethnic group? Bingo, you just qualified. Do you have a BMI over a certain number? Have you not been physically active recently? that qualifies you. I don't know many people who wouldn't fall into one of those categories. And so as long as you're 12 or older, you weigh at least 88 pounds. If you're 65 and older, you automatically qualify. And so how do you get it? First of all, you need to know your rights, because doctors will tell you that you don't qualify. You need to know your rights and walk in and say, do I qualify? I qualify because of X, Y, and Z. Please make sure that you are looking at my profile to make sure no medicine that I'm currently taking is contraindicated. This is something you want medical advice on, because there are medications that can't be mixed with Paxlovid. And so you want a doctor's advice on that, but that can be done through telehealth. That can be done at your local Walgreens or CVS, and Google test to treat. And that is a US government initiative to get Paxlovid in people. And contrary to popular belief, there is no shortage. We have plenty to go around. The problem is in distribution, because doctors don't know when they should be prescribing it, and patients don't know that they qualify for it and that they need it. And if you don't have a doctor, it's fine. You can show up at your local test to treat center, whether it's an urgent care or a lot of them are, again, as I said, are Walgreens or CVS or other pharmacy chains. And you'll get tested on the spot, which you want, because if you had a home positive test, you want that piece of paper that says, yes, I was actually infected with COVID, because you are going to need that proof later on. And so the only way to do that is by going in and getting an actual test. And at the same time, they will evaluate you on the spot to see whether or not you are eligible for Paxlovid and fill the prescription, which is free. It is free. And again, the best time to get it is on day one. So, I had trouble getting it for my own daughter. And you can imagine I'm coming from just about the most privileged point that anyone could in the world. We are seeing doctors who aren't able to put it together to get it when they get COVID, because when you get COVID, it's stressful. First of all, you might be feeling really sick, or it's just, like you're freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is, have a plan for yourself, have a plan for your parents, have a plan for your kids, know the rules and know your rights.
That's incredible. Now, Diana, for those watching or listening who say, okay, Diana, I need you to tell me what are the things that would qualify for me to get this. Is this on the website? Is it on your Facebook group? Where do we go for this?
I've been tweeting it out every day on Twitter. And I give the link to the CDC list of, what are if you look up on the CDC, what are the conditions that would consider somebody at high risk for a worse outcome from COVID. And as I said, these loopholes are so big, you could drive a Mack truck through them. So know where you qualify. So I got it for my daughter because she has eczema. It counts.
Oh, wow.
You do whatever you have to do. You do what you have to do. It counts.
Incredible.
Eczema is an autoimmune disease.
That's incredible.
Asthma is a good one. And remember, you don't need proof. It's self-attestation only.
Wow. Incredible. So Diana, let me ask you, I got to ask you this, because I know it's been a question that's been shared about, and then we're going to go to speed round, but this, I got to ask you, a lot of people are very concerned, right? You talked about how you were just on a plane not that long ago and kids are in school, one-sided masking, right? A lot of us are only masking ourselves, but the other person sitting next to us on the other end of the room aren't masking. Is this still effective? Is this still, like, what do we do then?
Any mask is better than no mask. Obviously, if both people are masked, you're better off. But if you can't control what you can't control. So I can't control whether the person next to me on an airplane is wearing a mask. So that's in a pretty close proximity. And I'm flying back and forth across the country just about every week. So in those situations, I will wear a very high quality mask, or ideally a respirator. Which, looks a little crazy, but it works. Am I going to wear a respirator when I go into the supermarket? No, but I do wear an N95. Don't share air indoors with other people. That's sort of the basic idea. Do I wear a mask outside? No. And am I taking every precaution possible? No, I'm not doing that either. The eyes are a vector point. I don't wear goggles. I don't wear glasses. You should technically, if you are, if you're immunocompromised or you're at higher risk, But, everyone has to play, you have to make your own rules that you're comfortable with, and that also rules that you're going to follow through on. So if you hold yourself to a standard that you're not going to meet, you're better off finding the 75% that you're going to meet 100% of the time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This was so eye-opening and such great information. A lot of things. I'm learning so much today. I'm thinking many of you, I see a lot of comments coming in. I think Vicky, so many comments coming. Thank you so much for being here and listening and learning from Diana. But you know what we always look forward to, and I know this is Joshua's favorite segment here, and that is speed round.
Okay, I'm a little nervous here.
Speed round.
So thank you so much, Diana. You've just been incredible. We're going to ask you 2 questions, give you 2 minutes now. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm a little nervous, but go for it. Let's do it.
All right. So Diana, this is the first question we have, and that is, we love to, if you could tell us what's the best advice that you've ever been given and how has it impacted your life?
That's advice. Okay, I'm going to go. I don't know that this technically counts as advice, but it is a saying that was a famous Rabbi Heschel, marched with Martin Luther King in Selma in the 1960s. And he said, "Let us all pray with our feet moving." And that's something that I think about all the time. We are living in dark times, and it's very easy to sort of rage against the world or sort of almost hide from it because it's all too much. But, you can pray for somebody or you can help them. And let's do both. And words can be empty. Follow them with action. And that's the way that I try to lead my life. And I think about that phrase all the time. Pray with your feet moving.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm making chills listening to this. I love this. All right. Second question, Diana, is this. We believe that everyone has their own yes factor. Some people call it superpower, but I'd love to know, Diana, what do you think that your yes factor is?
That's funny. I always say that whatever your superpower is also probably your biggest curse. Those can sometimes be the same thing. And mine have many curses, but one of them, which is also a superpower, is I rarely think about what could go wrong in a situation. I barrel in, and I don't take no for an answer, and I don't stop and think, am I qualified for this? Do I have the background to do this? I have no science background. I have no healthcare background. I jumped into this, having no idea what I was doing. I'll be speaking to MIT in a couple of weeks. I've done grand rounds for the NIH. I've written medical papers with Yale University, with the Mayo Clinic. Never underestimate what you are capable of, and don't think too much about the things that can go wrong, because it keeps you from actually doing anything. Just dive in and see what happens.
Just dive in and see what happens. Such wise words. And not only that, I think like we all love you, Diana. Just like I'm sure everybody's watching. I see Paul joining us also from Facebook Live. I don't know about you, but I absolutely love her. And I'm so proud to be in the same space with her right now and just listening to her share this story. If she's not inspiring, I'm not sure who's inspiring to you. But with that, I think Diana had mentioned earlier, but definitely give her a follow on Twitter. I follow her on Twitter. I really enjoy her posts, and she's just such a bright light. And you can see, she is just trying to do something for all of us, help the people that she loves, people that she cares about, people that she doesn't even know out there. And this is not what she did 2.5 years ago. This was not Diana's life, but it is.
I'd like to be out of a job, by the way. I can't wait till this is over.
Yeah, you and me
Please put me
both.
out of business. Go be super safe and put me out of business. That's what I want.
That's what we all want, right? We want COVID to not be something we ever have to talk about again. It's something that maybe we can talk to our grandkids about. I remember back in the day, but
The history.
amazing, Diana.
Let's put in the history books.
Right? You are absolutely incredible. It is it's such a gift to meet you today. And definitely, as she mentioned earlier, I'm going to say it because she's so kind. Definitely take a look. I mean, visit survivorcorpse.com. Do what you can do to help and share the message. I think this is really good information. We're all in it together. We're here to take care of each other. No judgment, right? Just positivity. That's what the show is all about. Thank you so much, my friends, for watching and supporting our program today. You know what I'm going to ask you to do? This one is a big, important one. I'm asking you to share this show with someone that you care about. Share it with your church, share it with your school, share it with your community, share it with people that are decision makers in that corporate donation budget that they might have. I think this is a really important message. It impacts all of us. And as Diana had said, the decisions that she makes and her team make can actually save somebody's life. So it's really meaningful. And as a reminder, my friends, you can find full episodes of Level Up with Winnie Sun on NASDAQ, KBCW, Amazon Fire, Roku, and many other places. And of course, Yes Factor, our brand new podcast, is now up and live. And so you can watch us or you can listen to us. We would love you to participate. Either way, please tune in again. Of course, I will see you again next week. I hope you have an amazing weekend. But let's say thank you so much to Diana. Thank you so much for your time. You are such a gem. I know so many people in the world love you, but we got to say, level up. We love you.
Thank you. I love you guys.
All right. And then